In this video, I'm going to do something a little different. Instead of showing you what to install on Linux Mint, I'll show you the exact opposite, the apps and changes I would never install on my main system. Because I'm naturally curious, I tested all of them in a virtual machine, so you can see for yourselves why I avoid them. This is purely an experiment, not a recommendation. If, after watching the video, you still want to install them, that's your choice. But at least you'll know what you're getting into. By the way, quick note, I recently opened channel memberships called Mint Penguins. If you want to support the channel and get perks like custom emojis and priority replies, you can join below. Now, let's continue. Yes, I know. Some of you use Chrome and love it. But on Linux Mint, I wouldn't touch it. And it's not about performance or the interface. It's about philosophy. Linux Mint comes with Firefox by default, an open source browser that respects user privacy. Chrome, on the other hand, is a Google product, a company whose business model relies heavily on collecting your data. Switching to Linux and then installing Chrome is a bit like escaping Microsoft Windows, but bringing all the telemetry with you. But I installed Chrome in a VM to see how it behaves. The process itself is simple. You download the deb package from Google's website, install it, and that's it. Chrome launches, works fine, syncs your Google account. There's nothing technically complicated about it. The problem isn't that it doesn't work. The problem is that it works too well. And in the background, it does exactly what it does on Windows. Sends data to Google, tracks your browsing, and integrates the entire Google ecosystem into your browser. On Linux, where privacy is one of the main advantages, installing Chrome is a contradiction. What alternatives would I recommend instead? Brave, based on Chromium, so it supports Chrome extensions, but without Google telemetry. Or simply Firefox, which in my opinion is the right choice for a Linux Mint system. This is the most controversial topic on the entire list, and probably the most important. If you don't know the context, Snap is the package system developed by Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu. The idea sounded good at first. Universal packages, auto updates, sandboxing for security. In theory, a step forward for the Linux world. The problem? Snap isn't truly open source in its entirety. The Snap distribution server, the Snapcraft store, is controlled exclusively by Canonical. Snap apps are generally slower to launch, larger in size, and less visually integrated with the system compared to native deb packages. The Linux Mint team noticed all of this, and they made a firm decision. Snap is blocked by default on Linux Mint. If you try to install something that pulls in Snap as a dependency, the system will warn you and stop the process. Mint chose Flatpak instead, a similar alternative but with a more open architecture based on the FlatHub repository that anyone can host. Still, I went against the grain and enabled Snap in a VM. The process involves several steps: removing the apt block, installing snapd, restarting services. It's not complicated, but it's clear the system doesn't encourage it. After installing it, I tested a few apps from the Snap store. They work, but they launch slower, take up more space, and visually feel slightly out of place with the system theme. Exactly what the community has been complaining about. My conclusion: if the Linux Mint team put in extra effort to block Snap, it's probably worth listening to them. They didn't make that decision for nothing. Flatpak and native deb packages cover 99% of a regular user's needs. On Linux Mint, Snap is a solution to a problem you don't have. This was the experiment that felt the most unnecessary, but also the most interesting from a technical point of view. Linux Mint is primarily known for Cinnamon, the desktop environment developed by the Mint team itself. Elegant, stable, smooth, and easy to use. There are also Mate and XFCE editions, but Cinnamon is the flagship of the distribution. Now, what happens if you install KDE on top of Cinnamon? Some users have wanted to do this, especially those coming from KDE-based distributions who are used to that highly customizable environment. But let's understand the context. The last official Linux Mint release with KDE was Linux Mint 18.3, launched in 2017. After that, the Linux Mint team decided to drop the KDE edition entirely. The reasons are multiple. Development resources are limited, Cinnamon has evolved significantly and covers the needs of most users, and maintaining a fourth desktop environment had become too costly in terms of time and effort. The decision wasn't welcomed by everyone, Part of the community criticized it, especially users who preferred KDE, but the Mint team stood firm. And if you want KDE, there are dedicated distributions for that. KDE, Neon, Kubuntu, etc. Still, I installed KDE Plasma in a VM on a Linux Mint system running Cinnamon. The process involves installing the KDE full or Plasma desktop meta package along with dozens of dependencies. The result? At login, you can choose between Cinnamon and Plasma. Both work. But the system instantly becomes heavier, harder to manage, with themes clashing in odd ways, duplicated settings, and overall a confusing experience. If you want KDE, install a distribution that's built for KDE. Don't force a new desktop environment on top of another, especially on a system designed and optimized for something else. It might run, but it won't run well, and nobody ends up happy. This is a more personal experiment because my stance on AI assistants on a local system is very clear. I don't install them. Newell is an open source application available on GitHub that works as a local AI assistant or connects to various APIs. It can use local models through Ollama or hook into external services. The interface is clean and installation via Flatpak is simple. I tested it in a VM and it works. If you give it access to a local model or an API, conversations run smoothly, responses come in, and everything seems useful. But here's why I wouldn't install it on my main system. First of all, any AI assistant that communicates with external servers is a potential data leak point. Your conversations, the files you give it access to, the questions you ask, all of these could be sent somewhere. Even with a local model, you need to fully understand what the application is doing in the background. Second, there's the productivity aspect. An AI assistant integrated into your system can become a distraction or a dependency. I prefer to work directly without an intermediary helping me at every step. And third, on Linux Mint, you already have the tools you need: the terminal, documentation, the community. If you want AI, the browser is one click away, and you don't need to install anything on your system. Newell is an interesting project for those who want to experiment with local AI. But for me, on my main system, no thanks. We've reached the final point of this experiment. Wine is a compatibility layer that allows you to run Windows applications on Linux. It's not an emulator, it doesn't simulate a full PC. Instead, it translates Windows API calls into Linux calls in real time. In theory, you can run exe applications on Linux without having Windows installed. I installed Wine in a VM. The process is relatively simple, and after setting it up, I was able to run a few basic Windows applications. Some work well, others have visual glitches, poor performance, or don't start at all. Each application has its own compatibility level, documented on the WineHQ website. But here's the fundamental problem with Wine on Linux Mint, and the reason I wouldn't install it. If you need Windows applications, stay on Windows. It's a pragmatic one. If your workflow depends on Adobe Premiere, AutoCAD, or other specialized applications that only exist on Windows, then Linux isn't the right solution for you at this moment. But if you choose Linux, choose it fully. There are alternatives for almost every popular Windows application. GIMP instead of Photoshop, LibreOffice instead of Microsoft Office, Kdenlive or DaVinci Resolve instead of Premiere, Inkscape instead of Illustrator. The Linux ecosystem has grown tremendously in recent years, and for 90% of users, it covers everything they need. Wine is a compromise solution, and compromises come with a cost. Time spent configuring, frustration when things don't work, incompatibilities after updates. Wine proves that running Windows apps on Linux is possible, but not always worth the trade-offs. I installed 5 things in a VM that I would never put on my main Linux Mint system. They all functioned in one way or another. None of them changed my opinion. Google Chrome runs fine, but Brave or Firefox are better choices on a Linux system. Snap gets the job done, but Flatpak and Deb packages are better integrated and more respectful of the system. KDE on top of Cinnamon is usable, but if you want KDE, there are dedicated distributions for that. Newell does what it promises, but a local AI assistant raises serious questions about privacy and productivity. Wine delivers mixed results, but if you truly depend on it, Linux probably isn't yet the complete solution for you. This experiment confirmed exactly what I believed from the start. Sometimes the best thing you can do with a good system is not to break it. Huge thanks to all channel members. Your support means a lot and keeps this content going. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what app or tweak would you avoid on Linux Mint. See you in the next video.